Hi there and welcome. In this episode, we're going to talk about how our brain is wired based on our experiences and how that affects the way we think and learn. My name is Selena, and with our in-house expert, Marianne Perry, she's going to talk about how it's really important, and it's so often overlooked, that our brain is wired based on our own experiences, and everyone has their own individual experiences. And a lot of parents can think that, there's only one right way to do things, or kids should learn in a particular way. But as you'll see, it's actually not the case. Everyone has their own unique set of experiences that really shapes the way we think and learn. So tune in to find out more what makes yours and your teenager's brain tick. Now, Marianne, I'd like to welcome you to the podcast. Thank you for joining us.
Great. Thank you, Selena. So this is a really important tip, I guess, for parents that know two brains are alike, because we often talk to others, not just our children, but to other people, thinking they've had the same experiences as us. Now, we know logically that they haven't had the same experiences as us. However, we talk as if those experiences that wired their brain has them understand and have the same perspective as our own. So it's really important to, as in any communication with anybody, is to be curious about what's happening in the other person's brain. Their silence doesn't mean that they're thinking exactly the same as us. Their silence could be being very respectful of us and what we have to say. However, it's missing the point because we're not tuning in and checking out what's happening in the other person's brain. So what neuroscience has discovered is the brain continually develops over our lifetime. That previously we thought all the connections were made by the time we were 7 years of age. Well, my mum was 96 when she left this earth, and she was still making connections based on her experiences in her later life. So all our experiences get added to our brain to help it form and be and wired. And this isn't just about knowledge and information that we take on. Of course, our brain is taking on information and knowledge and joining it to prior knowledge and information. This is about our experiences that we have, and the experiences support our beliefs about the world. And we often talk from our experiences and our beliefs. So therefore, as parents, we need to be mindful of, we're talking from our experiences and our beliefs. And you probably remember when you were young and your mother or father gave you advice, you would go, they're just not in touch. That's just so old hat now. Whereas if we connect it to the neuroscience, it's not just that they're out of touch and it's old hat. It's just that the child has had different experiences to the parent. We need to be mindful too that our children can have different experiences to us and have more and varied in certain situations than we have. So they could have more knowledge and more experience in their hobbies or their schooling in lots of situations than we have. And yet we speak as the adult as if we've had all the experiences and we know it all. Although I'm sure you're listening, all parents are listening and go, no, I know I don't know it all. And to be mindful of being curious. So if we're looking at this, no two brains are alike, we need to think about us giving advice to a brain that's wired differently to ours. We think because they're our child, they're going to be wired fairly similar to us. Now, I want you to get really curious and really surprised about the wiring of your child's brain because of their experiences. Remember, they've got different friends to you and to each other as siblings, different friends, different teachers, different hobbies, different sports. And they've got a different personality when they came into the world. They came in a different position in the family, eldest, middle, youngest. I'm not going into the generalizations that are made about that. I just want you to be aware that as the eldest, they've got a different experience being on their own for some time to the youngest who comes in with siblings already there. So I was aware, before even understanding anything about neuroscience, that my children, my 6 children, think completely differently based on their wiring and their experiences. So when we were talking about a topic, it was interesting to see 6 different perspectives, I guess 8 by the time we added mine and my husband's experience to talking about the situation. And therefore, we need to be curious about people's perception. Now, as parents, we think it's our role to give advice. Now, there will be advice, and I'd suggest I'd rather use suggestions rather than advice. Advice feels like you have to give it and they have to take it, which feels like a monologue. So if we look at
Sometimes it's so hard.
Yes.
I think I know the right way.
Yes. Yes. And so did your mum when she gave you advice, thought she had the right way. And that's the beauty of remembering that experience when your mum gave you advice. Now, there were pieces of advice that your parents gave you that were really useful. And there were some that weren't so useful. And we need to remember that not every bit of advice and experience that we have is going to be useful and relevant to our child.
Yeah, I can totally appreciate that. I think there's some areas though, like I think one of my fears as a parent is, you know, kids and their schooling and their education, and are they learning enough? Are they applying themselves enough? You know, it's a real sort of touchy, it's a hard thing for me to get my head around, because I feel these are the crucial years. They're all in high school now. It's like, do I send them to a really strict school so they learn, or, you know, be a bit relaxed with it and, okay, you're learning, or, you know, trying to find that common ground between giving advice of, please, you know, like, do your best, try and, you know, learn how to apply yourself, learn how to learn in school. That might not be the be all and end all. Yeah, I find that really that's a tough one of advising and suggesting.
Yes. And I do think there's a difference between guidelines. You are the parent and you can give guidance. And you need to be providing that guidance. In our book about the 5 emotional needs of everybody, including teenagers, we look at security. They need security. So the parent needs to be giving the guidelines. So, and there's a different way of giving guidance to giving advice, because advice is you should do and you need to do, whereas guidelines work to goals, common goals and values that you offer your child, which is different to you need to and you should. Because you need to and you should is specific behaviours. Whereas we really want, if we've given them guidance around the values and the expectations that we have as parents, it comes with that gives them a framework where they can choose their behaviours based on the framework given by the parents. So I think language, if we're talking about no two brains are alike and we need to be speaking to the other person's brain, we need to be very mindful of the language you use. And if we go, my guidance or my expectation, that language gives them some security to operate within. And then they can choose how they behave within those guidelines. And that's the key of parents. It's that really strict upbringing that doesn't give them any choice, and they do as I tell you. And what happens if we're too strict and we're not giving them the opportunity to think and grow and make choices in that, we're risking rebellious teenagers. Whereas if you don't provide any guidance for them, because you are the adult and you have social norms and values as a person that you want your children to follow, then that's the guidelines to operate from. And that's the giving them the security that education is important. That's one of what you value. It was one of my values. It was one of my husband's values. So education is important. And then what the child does with that guideline, that's their choice in that. And that is the hard part. What are they going to do given education is important? Will they value the same as you?
Yeah.
And perhaps it's not education, because I know some of my children certainly didn't and don't value education. However, they value learning. They value learning and growing and accessing information and having their own experiences to learn and grow from. But at the same time, as parents, we definitely valued education and gave those guidelines for them.
Yeah. And it's so true. You can give the guidelines across the board. I feel that I give the guidelines across the board to all of my kids, but yeah, the language is different to each child about achieving those goals or how they will go about it, and in discussions with them. It's a very different learners.
Exactly, which is different personality, different learners, different ways the brain has been wired, and you're adjusting your communication to each of those children. And I guess if we look at the growth mindset idea, is we're wanting each child to put in effort and be committed to whatever it is they chose. But there's the difference. It is that the guidelines are, we're encouraging you, the child, to put in effort and stay committed. And encourage, effort, commitment is different to you should and you need to.
Yeah. That's really true.
And a piece of
actually, can you just
yes, and even just, can you just? Well, they might go, it's not just. That's a big request you have.
I liked what
Go on.
Oh yeah, no, I was just going to go back to something else. Just that part of you giving advice and they're just sitting there quietly nodding, but you really haven't checked in with them.
Absolutely. So the brain hasn't engaged at all in the advice that you've given. It might be, and that's the part you don't know unless you've checked in. You could have given, in your advice, could have given real pearls of wisdom that they've taken on board and are going to apply. That's if you're very lucky that could happen. However, and it's good to check in and see what are those pearls of wisdom, if anything. But to me, it's when particularly busy parents, and who could be busy, distracted, or stressed, and the child comes with a challenge to you, we believe it's quick to tell them what to do so we can all move on. So, and we go, oh, pat ourselves on the back, that was great or not great, but I did my role, I gave advice, and hope to God that you see behavioural change because of it. Well, you'd be very lucky if a child gave you a situation, you quickly gave advice thinking it's pearls of wisdom, and they change their behaviour based on it. Whereas in terms of the brain, the more effort the brain uses to take on new ideas or come up with their own ideas, the more likely the child, the teenager, is motivated to change. So that's about the effort they put in to do their own thinking based on the dialogue, not the monologue, the dialogue that you have with them. So when they come with the challenge, get curious about what is the challenge, what is really challenging for them in this situation they brought to you. Because what is challenging for you based on your experience and your beliefs could be completely different to what's really challenging them. So it's listen to the situation, get curious and ask questions about what's challenging? How do you feel? What are your thoughts about that? Get that curiosity first. Then see if they're coming up with their own pearls of wisdom as they talk to you about it, because you're being mindful, you're listening, and you're getting curious to help them make their own new connections about their situation. And then once they've had that opportunity, if we have anything to suggest, we can suggest it then. Sometimes we get so surprised at the quality of their thinking that we don't have suggestions. They can come up with better ideas than we have. But of course, give them the suggestions at the end of that, and then ask them, what are they going to do about it now, rather than you need to do. You can give a suggestion of because it's your role as the parent to give the guidelines, and give suggestions of what you would suggest they need to do, and then check in to see how motivated and committed are they to following through on your suggestion. Or have they come up with something else that's going to be really useful for them? So it's definitely a dialogue. It's definitely having the parents to be mindful, listen, get curious, and then perhaps there's some suggestions. By the time a child comes to being a teenager, they really do know the guidelines from the parents, because the guidelines have come from what the parents value and what's important to the parents.
Yeah.
I know I'm making it sound really simple. However, whatever I give, if you go some tweak, I'll listen more when they're telling me their challenge. Because I had a child of mine, a tween, coming, and he was bullied at school. Well, I reacted to him being bullied and gave him advice, definitely. And what the advice from the school and from me was that he would withdraw from the playground so he wouldn't get bullied anymore. And every day I'd ask him about how did it go at lunchtime today, and I was focusing on the bullying. So we really weren't empowering him to be in the playground and play with others and build his self-esteem and his resilience. We withdrew, and I put focused attention on the bullying instead of what is building his resilience up and empowering him with his own qualities, his own characteristics. So he felt a bit more bulletproof when he was out in the playground and finding the people he could play with and who he would enjoy being with.
It's such an interesting point, because just reflecting back on the podcast we had last week about when I got a call from the school principal's office, and just my mindset and Ollie's mindset, and it's a bit like yours and your tweens. The brains, our two brains are so different, aren't they? Because when I got the call, I was triggered, parental fear kicked in, plus I was stressed and worried about all these other things. And then there's this brain over here really wanting to talk, and like you can really see they're just two different brains. And to be really mindful of that, because I guess in that situation you do want to come out with advice of what to do and like get this over and get it solved, because I've got dinner on the table to get out, and we've got soccer activities, and we've got stuff to do. So that's all my perception and my reality. And just to stand back and think, oh, okay, I either have to be in the mindset to be able to listen to this, or this isn't the right time to do it, and then find a time to do it. But I guess that whole to understand, they are two different brains. And often as parents, when we are triggered, our parental fear kicks in, and we're wanting to protect, and we're wanting to guide, and we're wanting to, to make it better really quickly.
Exactly. And when we have a look at that, we need to be mindful of what's the learning and growth for our child, and what's the learning and growth for us as parents and for the relationship. And when you're talking about the brains, we also got the brains of the professionals at school and their perception of it and what they want in terms of what they value as a school and the behaviour that they're seeking. We like to think that the behaviour that they're seeking is aligned to the values of the parents, different but aligned. And then to have a look at how are the adults in this situation aligning to support new behaviour. But what are we doing to support the teenager to do their own thinking and take responsibility for it and motivated for new behaviour?
Yeah.
So it's a fine balance and gives great outcomes when everybody's brain can work together to common goals, common solutions.
And it is also, just going back on your point before, being surprised at the solutions they come up with.
It blows me away.
Because I think my parental fear kicks in, thinking, no, you probably want it the easy way out, or, you know, I want to lift your standards or raise the bar, or you're not going to do that. You know, you're inherently lazy.
Yes. There's the piece around the wiring about the brain of the parents' beliefs, the parents' beliefs of teenagers, the parents' belief of their teenager. Whereas really to have this work well, it's believing in their potential. I think that's the key for parents, or a key for parents with teenagers, needing to believe in their potential, of that they're learning and growing, and they will be high functioning, resilient, capable adult. And then during
will they
even during teenage years, see them as highly capable and believe in them, and listen with that in mind, not listen with your own. When we're in a threat state, we have a narrow worldview, and we listen with that narrow worldview that brings in all our beliefs and limiting beliefs. Whereas to listen for their potential as they learn and grow, and be surprised of what they're capable of, because they will live into expectations of them.
Yeah.
Pardon me.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, it's a really, really interesting point, isn't it? Just to be so mindful, and even with our partners or work colleagues, friends, you know, to understand we really are two different brains. We see it so differently. We see things differently, and to be curious around it. And once you are curious, you sort of thinking about it now, you can sort of see all the boundaries or the barriers sort of subsiding, because it's, you know, it's sort of drops all those, it just creates a lot more understanding.
Absolutely. And because otherwise, if we are wanting to give our advice, because we're all knowing, we're the guru as the adult, we are coming from a perception of they don't know. And we've made an assumption they don't know, whereas the curiosity is, what do they know? And there may be some guidance and suggestions that they need to hear that will be useful for them. However, be mindful of our mindset of they don't know and I'm all knowing. Instead of, well, what do they know and how can I add to what they already know?
That's a really good point, because so often I can look at Facebook groups or what have you. I do look at other parenting Facebook groups when people are asking for advice, and say someone is talking about a really controversial topic, like allowing your teenager's girlfriend or boyfriend to stay over for the night, and how that, you know, and depending on what age they are, or how it can just blow up so quickly. And I just find it so interesting. I think, you know, there's people who go completely that way and that way, and there's so many different variations in it, and there can be hundreds of comments and people agreeing or disagreeing. And I just find it really amazing that it really depends on who you ask, and boom, you got to get their perception in.
And that's the key about guidelines. I said it's really important for parents to look at what are the guidelines they're giving their children and what happens as they grow into teenagers and becoming adults, high functioning adults. Those guidelines need to stretch and expand and be renegotiated along the way till they are totally independent of their parents' decision making for them.
Yeah. And that's what we really want to instill in them, isn't it? To be making smart decisions.
Absolutely. That's what happens in the corporate world when I'm coaching leaders. The leaders are helping others make decisions. And so parents' role is to help your child to make independent decisions. And when do you give them the opportunity to make those decisions? With your guidance? And that, because eventually they don't have your guidance, although I do get phone calls from my children often, possibly not for guidance anymore, but just to be heard, to be listened to.
Yeah.
Because they know that I see them as highly capable adults.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks for listening to our podcast. And if you found this of interest and want to dig a little bit deeper into our work, I highly recommend our ebook. It's called Unlocking the 5 Secret Keys to Their Emotional Needs. Now, neuroscience tells us that there are 5 emotional needs that underlie all human brains. And when one of those emotional needs hasn't been met or has been triggered, or perhaps we've unintentionally triggered it in someone else, we can find ourselves ending up in an argument or not understanding each other. Once you know what these keys are, then you can get to the underlying reason for the disgruntledness that's going on. So for example, one of my favorite keys that comes up a lot in our household is autonomy. And as teenagers start to turn into independent thinkers and young adults, autonomy becomes really important. And it's really hard as parents to let go and allow them to make choices, and because our parental fear kicks in, but they're also wanting to grow up. So our book helps you navigate through those conversations in a way that you'll build connection and have a lot more understanding. So download the book today. It's called conversationtoolkit.com/book and get it right now.